So in this video, we are now going to introduce ourselves to adjectives. As you should know at this point, all nouns in Latin belong to certain categories called declensions. First declension, second declension, masculine, feminine, and neuter. Third declension, including what we know as the I stems. And a noun is going to belong to one of those declensions. Now for adjectives, there are only two varieties. Unlike there being 5 varieties in Latin, 5 different declensions. In Latin, the only types of adjectives there are is what we call first and second declension adjectives, and then there are those that are known as third declension adjectives. Now, as one can imagine, the reason why we call them first and second declension adjectives is because they are going to have first and second declension endings. Now remember, if we were to look up a noun in the dictionary, you get the nominative of that noun, puella, and then they give you the genitive of the noun, puellai, or third declension. It would look like something like the word for light, lux, lucus, and remember that it is the genitive that tells you, one, what declension it belongs to, third with the short is in the genitive, and then it will also give you the stem. For adjectives, on the other hand, what they are going to do is that they are going to be listed in the dictionary with only the nominative forms. So for example, let's take the word for happy. In the dictionary, it'll be lightus, lighta, lightum, or lightus-a-um. And in that way, we know it's a first and second declension adjective because in the nominative, you see those first and second declension endings. And again, we call it first and second declension endings because for the feminine, first, for the masculine, second, and for the neuter, second. Us, a, Exactly what we see over here in the same endings that nouns use. Us, second declension masculine nouns. A, first declension feminine nouns. And second declension neuter nouns. So, if we were to have another one, it could be along the lines of, let's take a person's name, I suppose. Take Clarus, looking just for a short word. Of course, the feminine is Clara, and then Clarum. And again, it would most likely only have the dash A and then the dash UN. No problem. First and second. Now, you do also know that there are certain words of the second declension masculine that do not have an ending US, but nevertheless they end with the letter R. For example, if you were to take the word for handsome or pretty, you've got pulcher, but then it is going to be, it says plu instead of pull, pulcra, pulcrum. Instead of us a it's r a You saw this also with the word miser, misera, and miserum, in which it is r a But that's the first and second declension. And they will then decline with those first declension endings, which you should know, and then the second declension endings, which you should also know. Now, when we come over to the third declension, third declension adjectives, remember, all of them are I stems. And remember, I stems are certain third declension words whose endings are slightly different. And I have actually had them here circled. So do you see the third declension masculine and feminine endings, that we should be familiar with? And here I have it circled where they are different when they are an I stem. And then likewise for the neuter, same situation. Circle it where they are different for the I stems, and we've talked about this. Now when it comes to the third declension, there are actually 3 kinds of third declension adjectives. And it is all a matter of how many different forms that they are going to have in the nominative line. Because again, for adjectives, they only give you nominative, 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 nominative masculine, nominative feminine, nominative neuter. They do the same for third declension. Now the most common type is what we call the third declension adjective of double termination. And we use the name brevis, the word brevis, for this. So when I've written down brevis, it looks like I've written down one word, but in fact I have not. I've written down both the masculine and the feminine because The masculine and the feminine is identical. I just write it one on top of the other to save ink. And it has that fake ending that one would usually expect for third declension I stems in the form of brevis. And then the neuter form is brewe. And so here we can get by with squiggle dash E, but that would be writing out the whole word brewe. So when I've written on, and I suppose I'll write out the whole word for the first example, that right there, and I would have someone walk in and I say, how many did I write down? They would say, oh, you've written down 2 words. No, I've written down 3 words, but 2 forms, because that one's both masculine and feminine third declension, and then that one, of course, is neuter third declension with a phaco ending. That's why we can get by with only writing the nominative. So this is what we call a third declension adjective of double termination. A. Brevis, brevis, brewe. Fortis, fortis, forte. Pinguis, pinguis, pingue. Humilis, humilis, humile. Hilaris, hilaris, hilare. And so forth and so on. And that's your first word, double. D-O-U-B-L-E. Double. Because this is double termination. So again, brevis, brevis, brewe is a third declension adjective of double termination because in the nominative there are 2 forms. One form shared by both masculine and feminine, so it's really 2 forms there. And another form here for the neuter. Another type is what we call a third declension adjective of triple termination, which means that the nominative forms all the way across, masculine, feminine, and neuter, are all different. An example of this is alaker. Alaker is the masculine, no ending whatsoever, a true variant. Then you have the feminine, alacris, with a phaco ending is, just like we saw with brevis in the feminine. And then alacre, which is, of course, that fake ending E. And so the reason why we call this triple termination is because in the nominative, masculine, feminine, and neuter, 3 separate forms. Now, the final type of third declension adjective is that third declension adjective of single termination, which tells to me that all 3 genders of the nominative are identical. Felix. Now, if I would walk in and let's say, Mr. Chair, hey, Mr. Chair, how many words have I written here? He'll say 3. 3, 3, 3. Say, hey, how many here? 3. When I say, hey, how many here? He'd say 2. But he forgets that actually that is 2 forms. One is a masculine form and a feminine form written right on top of it. Likewise, if I were to say, hey, Mr. Chair, how many forms did I write down here with Felix? He'd say 1. But in fact, it's 3. Because it is the masculine, the feminine, and the neuter. Third declension nominative. Now the problem here is that from this true variant, and that's your second word, V-A-R-I-E-N-T, variant, second word to put in, it's embedded, you don't know what the stem is. This doesn't have an ending, but it's got a phaco ending. It's got a phaco ending. It's got a phaco ending. So you can tell the stem, it's got a phaco ending. That has no phaco ending whatsoever. It's a true variant. And so you have to add 3 more words in the dictionary entry of a third declension adjective of single termination, and that'd be the genitive, and the genitive, all 3 genders, masculine, feminine, neuter, which is phalicus. And thus you can get the stem onto which you then would be able to decline it. Also, let's say you were to take something like clemanes. There are lots of third declension adjectives of single termination that end with ns. Like you have felix, felicus, sagak, sagakis, audax, audacus, ferox, ferocus, clemanes, clementis, walanes, walentis. But it's more than just felix, felicus. It's felix, 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 felicus, felicus, felicus. Clemanes, 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 and then clementis, clementis, clementis. Like I said, walanes, walentis, clemanes, clementis, amanes, amentis, vehemanes, vehementis. It's really vehemanes, 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 vehementis, vehementis, vehementis. But we call it single termination because the nominative, 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 one form. Double termination with those fake endings, nominative, 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 two forms. And triple termination, nominative, 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 three separate forms. Now, you then will decline exactly as you would expect with third declension endings, but you have to remember all third declension adjectives are I stems. So it will be brewis, brewis, because really it's two forms, right? Brewis, brewis, brewi, brewi, brewim, brewim, brewi, brewi, breways, breways, brewium, brewium, brewibus, brewibus, breways, breways, brewibus, brewibus. Looks like there are 10 endings, but there are really 20, because 10 of them are masculine, and the other 10 written directly on top because they are the same, are the feminine. And then for the neuter, breway, brewis, brewi, breway, brewi, brewia, brewium, brewibus, brewia, and brewibus again. Why is it so important to know all 30 forms of the adjective? Because for an adjective to modify a noun, it has to have the same case, it's got to have the same number, it's got to have the same gender. So think about it in terms of this. If it is a noun, it will have 10 forms. There are 10 forms, we are not counting the vocative, of puella. Because puella only has one gender, feminine. 10 forms of servus, one gender, masculine. But when you're an adjective, and you have all three genders, litus, lita, litum, that would be the 5 cases of nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, ablative. The 2 numbers of singular and plural. And then the 3 genders of masculine, feminine, and neuter, instead of just the one gender. 5 times 2 times 3, 30 forms. For the third declension, it only looks like 20 forms, because obviously the masculine and the feminine are often written one on top of each other, but there are really 30 there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and then 10 more for the neuter. But remember, the whole key is that the adjective must agree. It must have agreement. Same case, same number, same gender, and that's your third word, agreement. A-G-R-E-E-M-E-N-T. It's got to have agreement. And we'll look to see how that works in just a moment. Thanks.